Equity Fund. Now, joining us in studio now, South Africa's leading private higher education institutions have committed to improving the quality and positioning of the sector in the country. To tell us more about this is Dr. Felicity Coughlan, who is chair of South Africa Private Higher Education. Felicity, thanks so much for joining us on the show. So you Great. So you speak about private education. For me, the moment you attach private to the education, it sounds like something is a little bit more expensive here, and we know that it's a cost issue, and we know that cost is one of the major reasons why we're having a problem currently in our South African education system. So take us through, or demystify the fact that private is more expensive.
Well, private can and often is more expensive, mostly because we don't get any subsidy for what we do. So fee income is the only form of income that we have. In return, however, students are almost always in far smaller classes with high levels of student support on far smaller campuses, and quite often don't have to incur residential costs because most private providers operate in far more cities than a large public institution would do.
Felicity, the whole conversation of distant learning, whenever we hear distant learning, there's a quality aspect that gets to our mind, and we're worried if we're indeed getting quality as opposed to conventional learning. How do you ensure that as you offer this, as you increase access, quality is at the top of mind?
Right. There's several ways to answer that, so let's break it down a bit. The notion that distance education is what it used to be is a bit of a myth. Right. You know, the old days distance education, what was even called correspondence education, right. You'd get a package in the post, you'd open it, it would sit on your desk and get stained with coffee, and then right. 3 days before the assignment, you'd quickly read up and write. Right. Okay? And the distance there wasn't only a geographical or physical distance, it was also between the student and the lecturer. Modern education, which is not contact-based, is not distance, because we understand internationally that students succeed only if they have relationships, A, with other students and with lecturers. So all forms of technology are now used. Online education obviously uses learning management systems, but telephone, SMS, all of those things are now built in. Distance now means flexible, that you don't have to come somewhere. It doesn't mean that you're separate from the educational process.
And, you know, Felicity, obviously you're trying to encourage students to look at alternatives to the public universities, but why should they consider private? If, as for one, you've alluded to, it's a little bit more expensive, okay, you don't have the residential costs and all of that, but number two, there is a perception that, you know, the established guys, or UCTs and WITs and UJs, you're more likely to get a job if you have a qualification from those guys than a private institution.
You've summarized in many ways why we have formalized the South African Private Higher Education Group. We recognize that South Africans don't know a lot about private higher education. They're often surprised to hear that there are 116 registered accredited providers. They don't often understand the close connection that many have with industry. They don't understand the kind of qualifications. They don't know that South Africa's got a unitary regulatory system that applies equally to both. And part of what we're trying to do through SAPHE is increase an understanding of what it means. It's not about competing with the big publics. South Africa desperately needs the big publics to settle and fly. The economic growth is dependent on a strong public basis. But we offer an alternative, and the levels of understanding of that alternative are really low.
But Felicity, higher education serves mainly to feed the job market or create entrepreneurs. Are there disciplines that are favored by distant learning? Because I'm trying to imagine it will be difficult to issue a technical course online as opposed to what you'd have elsewhere.
Well, yes and no. Technology has moved so massively that even biomedical engineering and chemistry experimentation and stuff can now be done virtually. It's about infrastructure and it's about access, and obviously in South Africa we have all sorts of challenges in that regard in terms of affordable data. Right. But this, again, the whole notion of distance is just simply not what it used to be.
So I'm trying to understand the type of a student that should consider a private alternative.
A very disciplined one.
A disciplined one. Yeah. But I also noticed that the likes of the Vegas and is it the AFTERs
Yes.
fall under the private education category. So is it if you've got a specialized career that you know, okay, I want to be in media, let me rather go to the media house that will give me what I need to get into the job market, or I want to be in
several categories.
Okay.
And niche provision, I think, is where private education started, around things like marketing, branding, advertising, and theology.
Right.
Now far more generalist and far more available. The reality is that students fall into exactly the categories that the publics are finding. UNISA, for instance, reports how many more of their students are older and now younger. Now they've got 18 to 22-year-olds, whereas they used to be just working adults. The point really is about the student discipline if you're talking distance education. If you're talking private, it's pretty much the same kind of profile. But that's where all the connections that I was talking about come in earlier. We recognize, and all people who are offering distance education, of course, recognize that you have to connect with the student. Because discipline is a lovely word, but if you're feeling lost, then all you are is a disciplined lost person, but you're still lost. So you need the connection with an academic, with a lecturer, with your peers to really root yourself in the learning process.
Well, Felicity, thanks so much for your time. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. That was Felicity Coughlan, Chair of South Africa Private Higher Education. Now, that is